I did want to make a film that was inflected by like a modern realism, which is another way of saying all these people live on the internet, in the internet. They live in this culture. They've seen the movies, and I wanted that to kind of get into the language of the film.
We need to free each other's hearts.
Let's start maybe with the idea of this movie as a genre. It's a modern day Western. Please tell us a little bit about taking this timeless genre, very American genre, and then putting a very contemporary story in this old genre. How did you arrive at that?
There are a bunch of little answers to that. I grew up in New Mexico, and I've always wanted to make a film in New Mexico, and I've always wanted to make a Western. But as I was thinking about making a movie about whatever the hell we're living through, it started to feel really right to me that I would maybe move to that genre. The Western fascinates me because it's sort of the national genre. It's about the heroic myth of America, but at its best, I think it's also contending with the reality of America. It's about lawlessness, and it's about borders, and it's about forging new societies, and it feels like at this moment, we're living through the collapse of something, and we're also on the cusp of something. So we're on the edge of a new frontier. And so all those things were kind of on my mind.
This is, of course, a period piece, a very recent period piece, and those memories are still fresh. Do you remember the time during lockdown that maybe some idea, something detonated in your head?
I started writing this in late May, early June 2020, when the film is set. And, there's something in the air that felt distinct, as I'm sure is the case for a lot of people in this theater. I was just feeling a lot of dread. I wanted to try to get my hands around what is happening in America. Everything was very fraught, and things had reached a boiling point, and I wasn't sure if they were going to boil over or explode, but it felt to me like, this moment feels like a major inflection point, and it's not going to stop being relevant. What I did at that moment was because at the time I was on Twitter and it was driving me crazy, I created a bunch of burner profiles, and I got myself into different algorithms. And that was very interesting and very alarming because I couldn't get myself out of them. I kind of had an idea of who the characters would be, and so I got into their algorithms. I curated them. But I did find that I couldn't get out. So I made these screenshots of, I guess, the most interesting, alarming, scary, weird tweets. I built an archive there so that I could come back to it, so it wouldn't all just be retrospective. The next very important part of the process of writing this, I flew back out to New Mexico. I just drove all around the state, going to different counties and talking to sheriffs. I went to different small towns, and I talked to mayors, police chiefs, public officials. I went to pueblos, and I talked to people there. That was a really useful trip, because the movie started to get away from me, and I already had the characters, but I found that those characters were getting away from me, and I also found that, speaking to people at this time when Biden was president, a lot of the people on the left, I found that they were pretty satisfied with the status quo and very dismissive of anything that contradicted their talking points. And I found that they were mostly giving me talking points. And then I was going to people who were on the right, who were very passionate. Not all of them, but some of them were very passionate and very angry. They felt condescended to, they felt ignored, and they really wanted to talk to me. I felt even better about what the project was, which was, I'm gonna have as the main character, as our surrogate, somebody that is maybe not the most comfortable person for me to be living with. I guess the project just kind of became about, I'm gonna turn the mirror on myself as much as I can, and I'm gonna try to see the humanity in the people that I, see as against me, or that I abhor, because we're all subject to the same forces.
This is your second collaboration with Joaquin Phoenix, who's brilliant in Beau is Afraid and also in this one. How have you and Joaquin approached the arc of this character? Did you discuss any backstories you might have about Joe Cross in your head with him?
Joe Cross is a very sentimental guy. That's another way of saying that he's not quite looking at his own life, honestly. And I do think he's somebody who would have seen a lot of those old Westerns, and that has informed his own picture of himself as a man of integrity, a man of action. He's frustrated. in his life and doesn't know why it's not all working.
So tell us a little bit more about your philosophy towards how do you structure a screenplay when, a character, Joe Cross, is doing increasingly, bad things that we don't agree with, but you still need to humanize him. You cannot really judge him as this devil. How did you pull that off to give us these like really multifaceted characters on both sides of the aisle?
The minute I start to judge these characters or condescend to them, it's just not interesting. It just gets boring. I don't know what's the point of doing that? I wanted the film to be very empathetic. It's just that it's empathic in multiple directions, and some of those directions are oppositional. I did want to make a film that was inflected by like a modern realism, which is another way of saying all these people live on the internet, in the internet. They live in this culture. They've seen the movies, and I wanted that to kind of get into the language of the film.
I want to talk to you about the sense of humor of this movie. It's a brilliant dark comedy. And even though earlier in Hereditary and Midsommar you were coined as the horror director, I think your sense of humor was always there. How do you approach humor in movies, especially the promotional videos in this and some scenes? So tell me a little bit about approach to humor in that sense.
Oh, how do you talk about humor? I make myself laugh, and I hope that you will too. I don't know what else to say there, but I'm glad you found the film's funny. That's good.
It is funny. As a last question, looking back at Hereditary, Midsommar, and I would say even Beau is Afraid, those feel like more contained stories. There's a more decisive finale, and this is more open-ended, and obviously the story of our country is still happening. And you hinted that somewhere else. Is this a world, is this an idea that you want to come back to? You want to revisit these characters and the story in the future?
Well, I have an idea for a sort of sequel that would be set in 2025. I liked the idea of this film kind of functioning as a Rorschach test, so that a lot of people will see a different film when they watch it. That can be dangerous. I've like heard people say, like, kind of refute that this is satire, and like that certain things actually reflect my worldview. For me, it was important that the film kind of become paranoid too, kind of get gripped by that paranoia. I don't know. If there is an ambiguity there, hopefully it just allows the film to live in a more interesting way.
And it's a perfect reflection of the times we live in. They're ambiguous times. It's a great movie for our really complicated times. Thank you so much, Ari.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.